Hello and welcome to the 360 chat. And again, on our second episode, we have a guest. This guest is a coach for career and business. His name is Brian Fairchild. And let's go and speak to him right now. Hi, Brian. How are you?
Hi, Stephen. I'm good. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for being on the show, Brian.
It's my pleasure.
Okay. So as we said, with your business and you're also a career coach. So tell us a little bit about what it is you do.
Okay, well, basically my focus is on supporting people who kind of get lost in life in terms of not quite sure what they're doing in terms of careers. So that can be people at at the absolute start of their careers who are just finishing school or university, who have got a whole life ahead of them, but what do they want to do? Through to people sort of midlife who hit the proverbial midlife crisis of feeling absolutely stuck in a job, been doing this for years. How do I get out of this? I've had enough. I want something different. But they're usually not particularly sure about what it is they do want. And then finally, people towards the end of their careers who are looking towards retirement and thinking, okay, well, what does life look like after work for me? How's that going to work? And of course, at the moment, there is such a lot of uncertainty out there with people. So many people faced with furlough, redundancy, with old certainties, whether you're working in retail or hospitality or the leisure industry. So many, industries that people have worked their whole careers in. Suddenly the certainty of having that industry there in the same way moving forward has gone. So there's a tremendous need for support for people to work through that process. And really how I work is just to connect them with their passion, find that inner passion that they've got and help them to get a plan towards working towards that.
And you mentioned that with this lockdown that we have now, obviously, there's a lot of people doing a lot of thinking.
Absolutely, yeah.
Having a look at the quiz. So do you find that you're getting more the younger generation, older generation? Is there a demographic here?
It's completely across the whole spectrum. So typically people maybe 3 or 4 years into their career, suddenly the certainties that they've had are no longer there, and they're thinking, actually, is this really for me? What can I do? Right. Through to people, as I say, sort of mid-career who think, actually, this is an opportunity for me to jump ship out of where I am to something different. Right. But actually, I don't know what that something different looks like for me.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting that the more we are seen to do things, the more we want to do other things. So you becoming a coach, how did you get to be a coach for careers and business then?
Well, effectively, my background's in HR and learning development. So with that particular background, I've always worked in the learning area and with coaches. And I've worked with some really brilliant people who are executive coaches, and they've always been an inspiring role model for me. So a number of years ago, I decided that this was my opportunity, due to being made redundant myself, to retrain and to develop a skill in coaching, which I did. But then at the same time as I was training, I landed a new job, which completely preoccupied me, and that sort of absorbed that sort of need for me, of course, as well as paying the bill. And then last year, that job came to an end. So it was, okay, now's the opportunity to do something. And so really when I'm coaching people, I've actually, it feels like I've been through that process myself.
Right. Yeah.
Thinking and identifying, well, what is my passion? What really gets me up in the morning? What am I good at? What do I really want to do? And coaching is a natural sort of progression, a natural choice for me in terms of using skills and experience I've developed over quite a long career, plus that sort of career experience, plus this inner driver to support others. So I have done quite a lot of voluntary work over the past few years, particularly with young undergrads at Nottingham-Trent University. And one of the drivers for that has been when I was an undergrad finishing university, I had no support. I had no idea what I wanted to do. And really my career path has been a number of happy coincidences, a bit like playing ping pong or pinball, pinging from one point to another without a clear direction. And I talk to many, many people for whom that is the case. And so one of the things with the work I've been doing at Nottingham-Trent is to help young graduates to actually connect in with that inner passion that they might have, that interest, and think about, well, what can they do in their lives.
Cool. And you mentioned the Trent, and you work with the Trent University. How long have you been working there for? It's
part of a scheme called the alumni fellowship. A lot of universities have this, where graduates from the university, and I did my HR qualifications at Nottingham-Trent, can come back and volunteer their time to mentor, support, teach, whatever capacity, current students. So I signed up for that scheme in 2015, I think in its second year of operation, and it's grown significantly since then, because there's a huge need for it within the university population. A lot of students who, academically they might be very good, but actually when it comes to looking at the jobs market and support with things like CVs or job interviews, they're completely lost. So it's helping them to develop a more rounded life skill and particularly understand more about the world of work, which when you talk to employers, that's what they want. And I think employers have equally found, people coming out of university might be very bright academically, but they might not actually have the mindset or the skills that employers are looking for in the workplace.
I find, and please, if you've been into an employer maybe 20 years ago, they were looking for just qualifications, and those qualifications were at minimum a degree, whatever that was. It didn't matter if you had a degree in being in fairyland, as long as it was a degree. But I've seen that change, and I've seen it change now that they want that degree, but they also want them to be able to have leadership skills, almost like the experience that, say, you and I have gained over the last 20, 30 odd years. They're expecting students to have that, which there's nothing like having experience. The more experience you have, the better. I'm not saying that doesn't mean those with little experience are still not skilled enough to do their role. But putting that pressure on a student is difficult for them, and it's more for them to do. Because I've never would want to go back to university or go to a study and do all that again, and plus learn the things that I'm learning in life at the same time. So you've done that university, and you're now self-employed. You work for yourself. You've been doing that for a little while, but you're married, is that right?
That's right, yeah.
And have you got any children?
Yes, been married for 30 years and got two children who are both, actually, my daughter's just finishing her master's in architecture at Nottingham University, and my son's just in the middle of his games technology degree at Nottingham-Trent. So they're both, within that student population that I just talked about. Yeah.
It's a very academic family by the sounds of it. In regards to the actual way that you're you're leading your career. Obviously, you allow them to lead whatever career they choose, but it must be handy to have a parent who is always going to be the parent, like mum and dad are always going to be that parent and guide as much as they can. But now, as a coach, do you find that they come to you for any guidance, or is it like, no, it's dad, I can't be, I'm not going to go to him?
It's a mixture. It's a real mixture. Sometimes your parents are not the best people to coach you. You need that bit of independence, but sometimes having that experience on tap is really helpful. So this week my son was elated because he'd got a really good mark for a piece of work he'd done, and he said, "Oh, thanks, Dad, because you pointed me in the right direction of what I needed to look at for this." And by looking at that, it made the difference with a final mark. So yeah, it's nice to be on hand and be that resource as well.
That is nice, yes. I tend to get my daughters tend to want to be coaching and teaching me as if I've just come from outer space and I don't know anything anymore. You know, it's like even a remote control is like, I do know how to do this remote control, please.
Yes.
But I think it's that kind of of young, not young children, but of your children just want to take over that role as they get older. Maybe it's just my children.
No, I think it's a pretty universal thing.
Yeah, it's good. Now, I know you and I have a familiar background in respects to our personal lives. I'm a coach for fertility, and I help people improve their happiness more than anything. And then that is also encourages to develop fertility. I know you've had in the past your own sort of challenges as well. Tell us a little bit about what they were, because I'm sure some listeners who are at the moment maybe struggling themselves. Just tell us a little bit about what your story is and where you came from and how it all happened. Okay,
so as I said earlier, I've been married for 30 years, and and obviously, as you know, I have two children now, young adults.
Yeah.
But at the beginning of our marriage, when we first decided to have children, it really wasn't easy, in that we thought would be something that would just happen, and it clearly does happen. For many people, wasn't happening for us. So after a certain period of not having a lot of success, we got into the medical system, in effect. And once you're in that medical system, you start at a certain point and you progress through in terms of intensity of treatment. And what we found was that each level, as you moved through it, brought its own stress. Each particular bit of intervention brought its own stress, and the whole process became more and more and more stressful. And effectively, it got to the point where there was no particular reason, in effect, for why we couldn't have children. It just wasn't happening. And I guess that medically, there were drugs that could help with this or that and the other. But in the end, it sort of got to the point where they were suggesting that IVF would be a good option. And this is obviously in the early 90s, when IVF was less advanced and less sophisticated than it is now, and probably fair to say, had a far, the success rate was not as good.
No.
But we were offered counselling as well, to say, okay, so there's that option, which is, we know is high stress, there's a hell of a lot of commitment, there's a lot of risk in doing that. Or there's the a bit of counselling to support you with thinking about your options and coming to terms with maybe life without children. So we actually only had one appointment with a counsellor, but she was very good. And it kind of just made us feel that the next stage was a stage too far for us, and that actually we could accommodate life without children. So that was kind of the turning point.
Right.
And having got to that point, it was okay. So this is it. We will live our lives without children. So my wife actually was in quite a stressful job, and she got a new job that was less stressful but was full time. Whereas previously she'd been working part time to help her to deal with distress. And we just enjoyed life. And basically, we just forgot about the whole let's get pregnant thing. And then one day it was like, my wife said, well, actually, I don't feel very well. And it was this sort of dawning realization that she might be pregnant. And we had an old pregnancy testing kit, and it was out of date. We tried it, and it had a very, very faint, thin blue line. And it's like, it's blue. Well, it's not very blue, but it's blue. And that was my daughter.
Wow. It's amazing. And I think, and sorry to stop you there, because obviously it's just a short story, the two sides of the story as well. As you as a couple, obviously the wife will have a different, her feelings, obviously. But as a couple, did you feel a strain in your relationship at the time?
No, I think it made the relationship stronger, if anything.
Right. Yeah. It's usually
I know it can go either way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's gone stronger for you. And that's good. That's and it's an interesting concept that when we come to the nitty gritty is how strong our relationships will get. So you said your daughter. I know there's a lot more to that story. There's a lot more things that have happened. We're talking about, we not that we want to brush over them, but just for time element, we know that things like you experienced miscarriages in the time as well. Can you just tell me at the time of those happening, did you feel that then you should just stop, or did you feel okay, that's just part of life? How was your mindset at that time?
Dealing with setbacks is huge. But if anything, it sort of reinforced the need to move on, to progress, that it didn't stop us from wanting that next child. Yeah, in a nutshell, that's the story. The only issue is in terms of in the middle bit, and I guess I should have explained this before. With the second child we had, it wasn't a miscarriage. We had to have a termination of pregnancy. And that was because the baby had something called hypoplastic left heart syndrome.
Oh, okay.
Which effectively would have given him a life expectancy of 3 days.
Oh dear.
So it was, as you can imagine, to have gone through the first pregnancy, which was not easy because Sarah has a condition similar to Kate Middleton, in feeling had very, very lot of sickness in her pregnancy. Plus she's type 1 diabetic. So had to be very, very careful because with the sickness and then diabetic control, it was incredibly difficult to manage at times. So the first 20 weeks was horrendous of all the pregnancies. So we'd got through the 20 weeks of this second pregnancy, just coming out the other side, 20-week scan, and they picked up the heart defect. And it was like, now we have the choice that you wouldn't ever want to make.
No.
And having made that choice, that was clearly one of the most difficult things we've ever had to do. Well, the most difficult thing we've ever had to do. And then having gone through that period, we were part of a local support group for parents who've had terminations through abnormalities, which was a lifesaver for us. That was a really good source of support. And particularly there were 2 women who helped to run that.
Right.
And we still meet up with them 20 years on.
That's amazing. Your life is beginning. What's for the future for the coach now? Brian, what's the future now? What are you going to be doing? What are your plans?
Well, I think to take the lesson from life and from the past experience is, to live in the moment, to enjoy life, and not let it grind you down, and just to grow the business and to work with people and basically do good work. And that's, if I can continue to do that till the day that I can get to the point where I draw my pension or whatever, then I'll be happy.
Brilliant. And if people want to get hold of you, how can they get hold of you?
Have a look at my website. I call myself the Beeston Coach. I live not quite in Beeston, but Beeston's the local town. And basically I call it the Beeston Coach because there's a Beeston Eatery, a Beeston Cobbler, a Beeston whatever-thing else. So why not have a coach in Beeston?
Yeah, definitely local.
And so it's that sense of place. But obviously, most of the work I do is online, so you don't have to live in Beeston to contact me.
No, that's true. We're now universal in the whole world. We're open to everybody, wherever in a career. So you can get hold of Brian and the website, and also I'll put the credits at the end there for you to see. But make sure you go. Brian, I'm sure you will be happy to chat with anyone for any inquiries. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm very happy to do that.
Cool. Yeah. So give them a chat especially if you've got some crosswise. I know many people at the moment are not quite sure, need a plan, have some kind of idea, get a path set onto, rather than sort of mid out there. So, and if you're at university, great man to come and see, have a chat with him, and help you figure out your future. Okay, Brian, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Okay, it's been a pleasure, Stephen.
Yeah, it's been amazing, and good luck with the future, and say hello to your wife.
Will do.
And we'll speak soon. And thank you very much to the audience, and thank you for watching, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you. Bye.